October 2021. I was working a 6-week contract as a night shift fire watch for a massive apartment complex under construction on the edge of the city. The job was simple, but mind-numbing. Walk the perimeter, check every floor for fire hazards or leaking pipes, and make sure no one was trespassing. On my 4th night, I found a fresh, half-eaten sandwich sitting on a stack of drywall, on a floor that was supposed to be completely vacant. The construction site was a skeleton of wood and concrete, 5 stories high and sprawling across 2 city blocks. At night, the wind would whip through the unfinished window frames, making the plastic vapor barriers flap like heavy wings. Skeletal. It was just me, my flashlight, and a heavy-duty walkie-talkie connected to a base station in the tiny security trailer out front. I was 24 at the time, and the pay was excellent for basically just walking around in the dark. When I saw that sandwich, my first thought was that one of the day shift guys had just been sloppy. But then I noticed the wrapper. It was from a deli 3 blocks away, and the receipt tucked into the bag was time-stamped at 11:45 p.m. Nervous, I had clocked in at 10. No one else was supposed to be in the building. I checked the deli bag again. There was a name scribbled on it, in black marker, Elias. That's my name. I stood there in the middle of the 4th floor, the smell of sawdust and damp concrete filling my lungs. My heart started to pick up speed. I pulled my radio from my belt and keyed the mic. "Hey, this is Elias. Is there anyone else on site? Maybe a late delivery or a supervisor?" There was a beat of silence. Then the radio hissed to life. "Negative, Elias. You're the only one on the manifest tonight. Everything okay?" I looked at the sandwich again. "Yeah, fine. Just thought I heard something." I didn't tell him about the sandwich. I didn't want to sound crazy on my first week. I decided to finish my round on the 5th floor before heading back to the trailer to check the gate cameras. The 5th floor was the most skeletal, just the framing and the roof. As I climbed the temporary wooden stairs, I heard a sound that made me stop dead. It wasn't the wind. It was the distinct sound of a heavy footstep directly above me. I turned my flashlight toward the ceiling, but there was nothing but the dark silhouettes of the rafters. "Hello," I called out. No answer. Just the flapping of the plastic sheets. I reached the top of the stairs and panned my light across the open floor plan. That's when I saw it. In the far corner, near the elevator shaft, someone had set up a folding chair. It wasn't there during my 2 a.m. lap. I walked toward it, my boots crunching on the grit and debris. Resting on the seat of the chair was a small, battery-operated baby monitor. I leaned in close, and my blood turned to ice. The monitor was active. I could hear the sound of my own heavy breathing coming through the tiny speaker. It was a 2-way monitor, and wherever the other half was, it was close enough to pick up the sound of my lungs. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness like a blade. "I know you're here," I shouted, my voice cracking. "I've already called the police." That was a lie, but I needed leverage. Suddenly, my walkie-talkie chirped. I grabbed it, expecting the dispatcher, but what came out wasn't the dispatcher's voice. It was a recording. It was my own voice from 10 minutes ago, repeating the words, whispering, "Floor 4 is clear. Floor 4 is clear." It played over and over in a distorted loop. That's when I realized the danger I was in. This wasn't just a squatter. This was someone who had been intercepting my radio frequency and recording me. I turned to run for the stairs, but a movement in the shadows caught my eye. Near the scaffolding on the north side of the building, a figure stepped into the faint light of a distant street lamp. Shocked, the person was wearing an identical high-visibility vest to mine. They had the same build, the same height, and they were holding a flashlight exactly like mine. For a split second, I felt like I was looking into a mirror. The figure didn't say a word. It just started walking toward me. Not running, walking. A slow, deliberate pace that felt more threatening than a sprint. I didn't wait. I bolted for the stairs, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly off the walls. I hit the 4th floor, then the 3rd, my lungs burning. I could hear them behind me. They weren't trying to hide their footsteps anymore. They were heavy and rhythmic, matching my pace perfectly. I didn't take the stairs to the ground floor. I knew they'd expect that. Instead, I ran toward the external construction hoist, the big metal elevator used for materials. It was locked with a key, but I had the master set on my belt. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so hard I dropped them once. Come on, I hissed. I found the key, jammed it into the control box, and the metal gate slid open. I jumped inside and slammed the gate shut, just as a hand reached through the mesh. I jumped inside and slammed the gate shut. The figure slammed against the gate. In the dim light, I finally saw their face, or rather, the lack of one. They were wearing a high-quality silicone mask that looked like a generic male face, but they had crudely drawn features on it, with a marker to make it look more like me. They didn't scream. They just stared through the mesh as the hoist began its slow, mechanical descent. But I watched them grow smaller as I sank toward the ground, their hands still resting on the gate, where mine had been seconds before. As soon as I hit the ground, I ran. I didn't go to the trailer. I ran straight through the main gate, jumped into my car, and drove 3 miles to a gas station before calling the police. When they arrived at the site 20 minutes later, they found the building empty. They found the chair, the baby monitor, and the sandwich. But they also found something the officers didn't tell me about until the next day. Inside the tiny security trailer, the dispatcher had been found unconscious. He had been hit over the head from behind. The logbook on the desk had a final entry in handwriting that wasn't the dispatcher's. It said, whispering, "Elias change complete. Elias is leaving early." I quit that job that night. I moved to a different part of the state and changed my phone number. The police never caught the person. They found a stash of my old mail and several discarded uniforms in a hidden crawl space behind the elevator shaft on the 5th floor. Whoever it was had been living there for weeks, watching me, learning how I walked, how I talked, and how I worked. To this day, I can't look at a construction site without wondering who's lurking in the shadows of the framing, waiting for their turn to take over the shift. And sometimes, when I'm alone in my new house, I'll hear a faint hiss of static from my phone, and I wonder if the shift change is finally over. See you in the next episode. Don't forget to subscribe.